Productivity. Gladiator.
I'm Brian Nelson Palmer. On this show, I share personal, practical productivity skills. And in this episode, we're digging into the tips you may have missed on how to successfully start something new. With me on the show today is Amanda Crowell. She's a coach and author on productivity and great work. Amanda, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
Share a little bit about your background and how you're into starting something new successfully.
I am a cognitive psychologist. That's the kind of doctor I am. So I focus a lot on the individual, sort of the individual and their mind, and how specifically that our mind creates our reality and how it impacts how we're able to do things. So start something new in one mindset is completely different from starting something else in a different mindset. A lot of the work can happen just internally to have a different experience starting something new. So I'm excited about this topic. Great work. The topic of my book and sort of the area that I focus on most is the work that matters most to you. So the stuff that I want people to start anew is whatever it is that's calling to them from the inside. But honestly, these same strategies and skills can be the difference between being able to do what your boss is asking you to do or really struggling to do that and not meeting expectations. So it can work on either end.
Yeah, we're really kind of running the gamut of we can apply these things to if you're currently have a day job and hoping to quit that and start a new job, or if you just want to learn Spanish, or if you've been given a new assignment at work and you've never done this particular assignment at work before, and now it's going to be a new thing. Right? It's kind of like that whole approach to trying something new, right?
Right, exactly. Well, and that's because you're a human in all of those environments. You're the same human when you're at work. You're the same human when you're trying to learn Spanish. You're the same human when you're in a relationship with your husband or kids or dog. And we think like, oh, I'm this, now I'm being my worker self but really there's a you in there that's a pure, honest, like the Amanda-ness, the Brian-ness, like that carries with you in every environment. So if you can really understand that person, then every environment can be informed by the best strategies for you, which is what we're looking for.
Preach, Amanda. Absolutely. I mean, everything with Productivity Gladiator is about the person as a whole, right? This applies at work and this applies at home. One thing I'm curious about, there's plenty of folks. I mean, I talk about productivity. You talk about productivity, great work. There's a lot of people who work in this space. So what is it that you would say makes you a little different from those who might do the similar things?
My background, like I said, I'm a cognitive psychologist. I have a PhD in that. I've worked in schools and organizations to help focus on like what are the people in the system? How can they work together? Like, what do they need to change? And it's a particular kind of change management system that I bring to all of my coaching, and it's all through the book, and it's all everything that I do is really honoring of human beings and the way they struggle to make change and the kinds of things that unlock flexibility and ability to make change. And so one of the interesting things, and it's called improvement science, that's the particular kind of change management system that I've been trained in. And the thing that I love about it is that it really changes the conversation. Often when we talk about productivity, it's about like information. Can you tell me exactly how to time block or use the Pomodoro method or have a morning routine? What should I do in the morning? But the thing that you learn from improvement science and from working with people, and I know for sure that you've had this experience, is that information's free on the internet. All the information's already available. So it can't be about the information. It has to be about the implementation, about the person in the system, and like what beliefs are they bringing to it, and how do they, like the same exact tip, whatever it is, set strong boundaries by turning off your email when you leave for the day, right? Like that's like a tip. That's a piece of information.
Yeah.
But then it's like nobody does it, or they do it and it makes them deeply stressed, and it really worked for their best friend, but it didn't work for them, and they're very confused. I thought this was the key to productivity. It's like, well, no, it's just a starting point. There's so much more. It's all in the doing of it that changes it completely. And I think as a cognitive psychologist and a sustainable change management expert, that sort of approach to it takes it out of, here's some good ideas. Don't you think I have good ideas? And into, who are you? What are you hoping to accomplish? How does this idea fit into your prior life, what you're currently doing, the stresses you're feeling, the relationships you have, like your self-expertise is what we call it in the book. Well, what I call it in the book, that directs completely what works and what doesn't. And so it's
Yeah.
that skill set that makes all the difference.
With that as an intro, then let's talk about our topic for today, successfully starting something new. What were the things that came to mind right off the bat for you on successfully starting something new?
The first thing that I think people misunderstand about themselves is that we are very particular, right? So it depends on what you're starting. So the classic example of starting something new, it's like, I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to start exercising, right? So we know what it is that we're trying to do. And we've probably read a lot about it. We've probably, watched a lot of people's transformation stories. And then we go try to do it. And at time and time and time again, we struggle to do it. And then it's a question of like, well, we already have the information, right? We need to move our bodies and get sweaty and increase our heartbeat. Maybe we have a lot of information. Maybe we've done a ton of research. And it seems like the more information we have, it doesn't actually change our experience of it. One of the things I think I'm most known for is this TEDx talk I did back in like 2018. It was called 3 Reasons That You're Not Doing What You Say You Want to Do. And it's about the mindsets or the beliefs that we're bringing into what it is we're doing. So we're trying to prepare to exercise. And we're like, well, what do I like? Well, I like yoga and I should run. And we have all these beliefs and we continue to get the same result. But if we actually ask a different question, which isn't about the tips and the tricks and the strategies, but is instead about what beliefs are you bringing into what it is you're trying to do, then you can start to actually move the needle. My personal experience that's conveyed in this TED Talk, but also like everywhere I've ever been, it was like a viral article, and is that I would never ever exercised at all, period. I was totally against it. I didn't want to ever like sweating. I was against it. I was like, some people sweat and some people don't. I don't sweat for me. And then I had 2 kids and I couldn't like carry them around and I had really bad back pain. So I taught myself how to run, then how to swim, then how to bike. And then I did a triathlon and became somebody who it should have like never been my story. Like it should never have been my story. And in that transformation and that experience of going from somebody who like was categorically against it to being somebody who did it regularly for years, informed a lot about how I understand change sort of writ large, whether it's in an organization or with a person. So sometimes, and what it came down to wasn't like how to run, although I did need to fix my running because I was like messing up my plantar fasciitis. I had to learn chi running, but that was just like a very easy shift. Chi running was not the same.
No. Yeah.
I believed I can't. I just cannot. Some people can. I cannot. Not that I don't want to. I didn't want to. But it wasn't that. It was that I felt like something about me made it impossible. And we think when you say that to people, they're like, no, I know it's possible. Like in your mind, you're like, I see a world where all the stars align and I could exercise. But we don't think that in the regular world as we currently are, we can do what we want to do. That's a huge block. If you believe that secretly it's not possible, then why would you persevere? Because that's really what we're talking about, right? It's about persevering when it gets hard. Then there's like people like me don't do things like this. People will hate me if I start to do it. People will judge me. People will misunderstand me. If I start exercising, people are going to think that I'm like on my high horse or whatever. The stories we tell each other and ourselves about what people will say about us when we change keep us locked in our current situation more than almost anything else. You don't want to change because you don't want the people to turn their back on you. And because we don't say it out loud, we don't discover that nobody really cares whether we exercise or not, or whatever it is we're trying to do.
What you're saying really resonates with me on you are the type of person who does this, or I don't normally do this. And but then what will people think about me if I used to be the drummer in a rock band and now I do productivity stuff? And like, well, what will people say because I used to be in a rock band? What do you notice are the indicators that might be what's holding you back?
It is what's holding you back, first of all. Well, so the 3 are, I don't think I can, people like me don't, and I don't want to. So those are 3 sort of different things. And when you've struggled with something your whole life, all 3 of them are actively at play. The one that you're talking about, the belonging one, is sort of the header of it, is holding most people back from any change. Like when you just think about the basics of human beings and change, our mind does not want to do something different because we know for sure that the things we've already done didn't kill us last time. So if it didn't kill us last time, it's probably not going to kill us this time. It's a lot safer and easier just to do what we've already done. And so any little change sometimes, like, let's say that you were like a huge fan of Sex and the City. And then you were like, this new Sex and the City show came out. It's called And Just Like That or something like that. And maybe you don't like it, but you don't tell anyone because you are a person who likes Sex and the City. And you've built these bridges with people. You've talked about it. You've worn the t-shirt. You've gone to see the movies, wearing the outfits, right? Like, you're a person who likes Sex and the City. You're going to keep it to yourself if you don't like it Just Like That. But the truth is, like, the indicator that it's holding you back a lot is if you're hiding it, if you're like, I'm going to exercise, but I'm not going to tell anyone. Or I'm thinking about changing my job, but I'm not telling anyone. Or I'm telling the one person that I have, like, in my mind gone through all the things they could say. They're not going to say it yet. And if that's happening, right, if you find yourself trying to, like, change, but not let anybody see you change so you can make sure it's safe first, that's just a red flag. It's not a problem. It doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means, like, you're nervous that somebody's going to, and our feelings, the most vulnerable feelings are the ones that feel uncertain like that. Like vulnerability or disappointment or hurt, like those are the hardest feelings to feel, right? If you're angry, you can feel it. I'm uncertain that you're gonna still like me if we don't like the same shows. Like, is our relationship strong enough for us to talk about Big Bang Theory instead? Like, it all sounds so ridiculous. But really, we don't ever want to be rejected by other people. Like, that is a real hard thing to face. It's at the core of, like, so many productivity tips too, right? Like, how many times, I was looking at your program, like, how many times have you told people, like, turn off your email? Don't check your email in the middle of the night. Don't, like, check your email in the morning and at night. Like, we have all these email rules, like, or suggestions for prioritizing email. I don't know what your suggestions are. Those are usually mine. And then people are like, I know that the reason that they're not doing it is because they don't want somebody to say, why didn't you get right back to me? Don't I matter to you? But that's not what comes into our minds. But that is how we feel. Like, we don't want people to interpret our behavior as rejecting of them because we don't want them to reject us. We want to stay in connection. It just matters so much to us. And so we need to just face it and then maybe have a conversation. And usually these things resolve themselves and the block's no longer there. Now we can walk right through that door. And that's the difference of, like, is it really about the tip or is it about the way that we are showing up in our lives trying to make change? When we don't know who we are or what we're worried about, then we're locked, but we don't know why.
These are incredibly helpful as far as what's holding you back. And when we were talking about today's episode, we're talking about successfully starting something new. So once you get past the things that are holding you back, what's next, Amanda? How do you?
Well, I like that you think you get past the things that are holding you back.
Because it's my dream world. Don't ruin my dream, Amanda. Come on.
Crush your dreams. Because actually, have you ever heard the analogy that we're all going around and around the same mountain, just seeing it from different perspectives? But we're always still, you are still, whatever it is that's got you locked up, you're just going to perceive it at a different level. You're going to be right back there again. So, but I am going to answer your question. I'm going to shift a little just so that we can see it from a different perspective. So when we think about what it means to do something new, we have to start that something new. We have to keep doing that something new when it gets hard. And then we have to finish that something new. Okay. So what feels like a good example to use with these three? It could be like, I want you to be a scrum master, right? I want you to run this agile project management team. All right. So let's say you have, like, all you've ever done is regular project management, pushing from the outside. You're just the reminders guy. You send a million emails. You're trying to facilitate communication, you're setting up meetings, whatever.
Yeah.
So you have to first feel like you know what it is you're doing. So if you find yourself, this is like the starting, like beginning to do the project, you have to, if you're having a block against it, you might not be. It might be that you've already taken a program and now you're going to implement it. You're very excited about it. There is not really a block. But if you are feeling a block, you may ask yourself, like, what is it? Like, who were you before? Do you feel like, I could imagine you having, like, a belonging block around, like, I feel like an outsider and now I'm joining this team, but, like, they don't even really want me there. It's a bunch of software designer people and they, like, do not care whether I understand their blocks, you know? So that's a belonging block. And you have to talk yourself through it, have a conversation with them. You can't have the right conversation until you know what the block is. Hey guys, I know I'm joining your team. I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to tell you what to do. We're going to try this in a new way. It might feel awkward. Can you tell me if it feels awkward? You know, you have to have that belonging conversation to unlock it so that you can begin the work. You might have other blocks, but let's just stick with that one for now because that's where we started. Then you begin the work. And now like you're doing something you've never done before. And so we have this bizarre expectation in the West, at least in the US, that you can do something perfectly when you've never done it before. But the truth is that you can't do anything perfectly if you haven't done it before. It's just not possible.
I mean, it's so many, like, God, what was a quote the other day about, actually, it was somebody about podcasts. Just because your 100th episode is going to be amazing doesn't mean your first one's going to suck any less. And like, so true. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So some of this is about the organizational level. Like you have to have an organization that says, hey, this is a beta. This is your first time. Or they have to give you like a coach or something who can be there to co-facilitate with you your first scrum or something like that.
Sure.
But either one of those is fine organizationally. But once you're in there, you also have to live in the world you're actually in when you're starting something new. In the future, you may be able to like spin up a bunch of like fairy dust and make it look easy and effortless. But when it's the first time you're doing something, it's a whole lot better for everyone on the team if you say like, okay, friends, here we are. We've never done this before. You haven't done it before. I haven't done it before. I've been trained. I'm going to do my best, but we need to talk about it and we might stumble. And if you ever feel awkward, I just need you to tell me. That's a psychological at the core of it, right? Some of it's just communication, but at the core of it, it's a psychological principle called mental contrasting, which is whether you're an individual or a group. If you admit at the outset that things are going to go wrong, then you are not surprised or shook or worried or upset with each other when those things go wrong. So doing a little mental contrasting from the beginning, I might use the wrong words or I might not understand your process. And if that happens, what are we going to do about it? That's what you do. You say, what's going to go wrong and how are we going to get around it? So do that as a group. When I misunderstand how quickly something's going to happen for you because I haven't done your work before and you haven't done mine, how are you going to tell me that so we can stop and actually have the necessary conversation so we can get back on the same page? Now, when I say, well, you can do that in 2 days. So could you come back with your completed code in 2 days? The software designers don't go off and burn you in effigy and then work around the clock to get it done and then come back and they're really mad at you, but they never told you that there was a problem with doing it. So some of that mental contrasting is helpful. And then when something does go down, because you can't catch everything ahead of time, otherwise
Sure.
things would be a whole lot better, then it's about having the skills and again, it's sort of some of the same stuff, but it's about recognizing and talking about and trying to always ask the question like, what's really happening here? What are we, instead of getting caught up in how it's supposed to be, because you've never done it before, so you don't really know how it's supposed to be. All you know is the like fairy tales people spin for you.
Yeah.
From there, like, I've done it 100 times. Let me give you some advice. And the advice is like so bad because they don't remember at all what it was like the first 3 times they did it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I think it's like having those skills and like always bringing it back down to like, what are we hoping to accomplish? What do we really just want to get this piece of code launched into the system by this day. So if that's what we're really here to do, then all the rest of this that we're doing so badly, we can just kind of fumble through it and not take it so personally.
You know, the concept of beginning with the end in mind, right? Like what is ultimately where we're trying to go. If you focus on the path to get there might not be the path you thought it was at all.
Certainly won't be, right?
But as long as the path is still taking you to the place you wanted to get to, then you will ultimately be successful, even though you're taking a total right turn sometimes on some of the things you're talking about.
I think what's hard about that, and I think that like the reason why that isn't a panacea, right? Begin with the end in mind, is that so much else is at play when people are working together, you know?
Yeah.
So people want to look good while they're doing things. They want this guy, our fictional friend who got this big break to run this scrum team, like he wants to look like a rock star. He wants these guys to like him. He wants his boss to think he did like a good thing by putting him in this role, and he wants it to be the easiest rollout that any piece of software has ever had. And so like that expectation, and then these guys brought in on this beta team, they have expectations too. Maybe they're mad. Maybe they think it worked fine how they were doing it before with their waterfall project management. They were totally fine with that. So what's the problem, dude? So like sometimes like it's in that layer where starting something new, especially if you're doing, when you're doing with just yourself, you can do it with a notebook and like affirmations. When you're doing it with other people, you have to bring some, you have to make, in what in education we call making learning visible. We have to make the conflict, make the situation, we have to make it visible. And then we all have to agree that what we want more than anything is to get to the other side of this with our relationships and our sanity intact, then let go of some of these other things that we don't even know are driving our behavior. The guy who's on the team and thought waterfall management was fine has been doing it for 50 years. And can we all just stop jumping on trends? That guy, you know, the veteran, you know that guy.
Yeah.
Like saying to him, I know that you hate every minute of this, and I'm sorry, but we're doing it. So can we just pretend for a while? Like, can we be friends long enough to pretend? That kind of stuff is remarkably helpful when a group of people is trying to do something for the first time. Maybe you're right. Maybe it will be bad, but we will not know that until 3 months from now when we've done our sprint. So can we put our swords down for a minute? And now we're capable of beginning with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Such as it.
You know, while you're talking about this, I'm also reminded that one of the biggest holdups that I hear about sometimes is people think, well, I haven't been trained in this thing, or I haven't had education is this thing that holds people back because they haven't been trained in it. And so there's this one train of thought that like, just do it, just try it. You won't know until you try. Like, just start, just start. That's the theme. And make sure you get the training and education. So there are people who do both. There's the people who are like, well, I'm going to go back and get my master's first before I do this. Or they almost hide behind education. And then they're somewhere in the middle. How do you know what's the right level of education? Or is it really just start every time and get the education as you go? What do you say to that?
So I'm in an interesting position because I have the terminal degree. I have a PhD. I have 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and a PhD. All of it.
Holy smokes. All right, you've been through this.
Yeah. But what's interesting is like I took it to its logical conclusion. I got all the possible education, and I was still suffering through starting something new. And where I land on that, because but the exact thing I was studying was cognitive psychology. Like, how do we actually create our minds and change our minds? It's actually my area of expertise. How do we change our minds? And so here's the answer to your question. As far as I'm concerned, if people's lives are at stake and it could go horribly wrong, get the education that you need, period. I see a lot of like life coaches, no judgment, I'm just saying, life coaches saying that they're qualified to help people with their trauma, and they're not, and you can hurt people with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, first and foremost, do not pretend to be a doctor and go and like give people surgery because you're like, I'll just figure it out. No, you don't do that. Okay, so now we've named that. So outside of that, out of like in the world that most of us actually live in, right? Should I go and try agile project management? Should I write a book? Should I start a blog? Should I exercise? Should I like all the things? I think that you should, for your own sake, depending on the kind of person that you are, you should go learn a little something about it so you see how people talk about it. It's good to know the conversations that you're walking into. I find that's helpful for me. But after that, instead, the real knowledge that you need is not knowledge. It's not facts. It's skills, right? You need the ability to recognize you don't know something, ask the right questions, build up enough body of knowledge, move forward. Recognize you're now on the edge of what you don't know, ask the right questions, move forward. That's the skill set. Can you develop expertise through conversation and know when you've reached the end? Like, it's like an emergent thing. If you try to know everything before you start it, you can't. But if you try to do it while knowing nothing, then you're also going to waste a ton of time, and people aren't going to like that. So I think it's that space in the middle that you have to learn how to navigate, which if you have a degree of any kind, you probably have enough skill to read a few books, watch some YouTube videos, and then give something a try. If, especially if at work someone saw you and thought they could do that, believe them and give it a shot.
Yeah. I think I really like what you said also about the consequences, or if somebody's going to get hurt or somebody's lives are at stake, then yes, but otherwise try it. And I think that's really true. Is a lot of trying something new is the learning of going through it the first time. And if nobody's lives are at stake or no one's going to get hurt, and there's not a huge financial hardship that would come from you not quite doing it right the first time, I think 90% of the trying something new that people are exposed to are things where there are not consequences. So give it a try. And like you said, there's AI. You can ask AI, you can look up YouTube videos, all the knowledge is out there on the internet. And if you're smart and you've got a college degree, you could probably go learn it, but you don't really know exactly what you need to learn until you start anyway.
You waste a lot of time.
The wrong course completely.
Yeah, right. And you're like, I am fully informed about this thing that I will now never use.
Yeah.
Well, and let me just say this, the other thing about improvement science that has been hugely helpful for me and all the people that I coach, and, it's built into the book, is one of the things that people do that sabotages their success when they're trying something new is they're like, I would like to write their dream is I would like to write a New York Times bestselling book, but they've never written anything. Right. Yeah. So they're going to go their magnum opus. Doesn't sound a good idea. Why not instead start a blog? Write one blog. It's also about one of the things that is really getting at the right level of something that when you think about doing it, you know what to do today. You know what to do this week. You know what you can accomplish in 90 days. Then you're at the space where you can really, I would never recommend that somebody go off and fully implement getting things done, the full system of getting things done. Because it's huge, it's enormous, it's massive, it touches every aspect of your life. But you can pick a little part of it and get started on it and discover what there is to know about that piece, and then add another piece, and then add another piece. So starting much smaller than people think is reasonable is also a sort of magic trick to get a lot further a lot faster. You think it's going to slow you down, but it speeds you up considerably.
Absolutely. It's the bite-sized thing. You got to get it. You got to get it down into do this little piece and then this little piece. And then what is it? Oh man, what is it? Oh man, I can't remember who said it. It's the journey of 1,000 steps begins with
Lao Tzu. How do you say it?
Lao Tzu. There you go. Begins a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And then
and if you're standing there thinking about 1,000 miles, you're not going to go anywhere. Whereas if you're like, I could take one step. I don't want to, but I could. And then you do. Yeah. You're like, wasn't so bad, And then that emerging, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? Always stays in that manageable space, and you don't overwhelm yourself, because overwhelm stops you in your tracks for sure.
Now let's shift the perspective just a little bit, because a lot of what we've been talking about is kind of the employee perspective, right? You are the person doing the work and you're going to start this. Can we shift to the supervisor perspective now? So now you've got a team below you and there's somebody above you that you are reporting to.
There is nobody above you, or there is?
There is.
Oh yeah.
There is somebody above you. You're a mid-level manager somewhere, or you're going to be, and you've got a team below you, and now your team is assigned this something new. How does that change the conversation for you, Amanda? Or does it?
I think that the number one thing that managers need to have in this world where the truth is everything's changing really fast all the time. Every manager's always got a team doing something new. So they have to be managers who are good at what they do, recognize that their team members are human beings. Then they have emotions and egos and worries, and they've got these three mindsets that can get all tangled up, and they've got these histories with each other. And a manager needs to be able to facilitate at the level of the group and structure things so that there's a humanitarian aspect to the way the team is structured. Like, if you are starting something new as the manager, start it as a beta. The work might not change at all, but calling it a beta will calm people down, make them start doing the mental contrasting work. And if you start every meeting with like, okay, so here's where we are, here's where we're going, how are you guys feeling? Like what came up between you? And, it's one thing I often hear people have these like protocols and they're going to like start the meeting with this question. But if you don't mean it, if as the manager, you don't really mean it, if you say, how you guys doing? And people say, dude, I'm dying. I don't know how to do this. If you ask them that question, but they can't say that, then you failed at being a humanitarian manager, right? So I think managers need to develop their own skill set at the ability to ask people real questions and then handle the answers that they get back. And so there's lots and lots of tips and tricks. I've heard a lot of them on your podcast, right? Like end your meetings early and ask them about their blockers. And all of those are really good tips. But I think at the core of it as the manager, if you're helping a group of people do something they've never done before, your job is to create a mindset at the group level that is, we don't know how to do this. But you know what, dude? I know you can. Or we wouldn't have brought you on this team. I'm asking you to do this hard thing. I'm asking you to trust me to facilitate it. I'm asking you to trust these people, whether you like them or not, that we can cross this finish line together. Might be messy, but we can do it. That's the kind of like, let's not pretend it's going to be easy. Let's not pretend we're all going to like rock stars. If a manager can hold that and block up, like protect their people so that when his boss looks down or her boss looks down on them, they look like rock stars. That's the magic of the manager. Like they hold the space for the mess here, but they have the reflection up so that the people look good. They might look like a mess, but their boss isn't seeing down into the mess at the team level. If you can do that, then people feel safe enough to really learn how to do something new.
Now, let's talk about micromanaging.
Yeah.
A little bit. Like if they've never, I'm having two thoughts actually, and I want to make sure I cover them both. One is the micromanaging and the other is the manager who thinks they need to be an expert on it before their team can do it, right? There's a lot of managers that got promoted because they were really good at doing the job.
Individual contributors, right.
And so they're a good individual contributor. And so now they've risen to manager. And so the only way they know how to be a rock star is by being an individual contributor. And that's a very different thing. So can we talk about those two for a second? Let's start with the micromanaging. Like, all right, so now it's something new. What's the advice to the manager who's constantly like, when is too much into the weeds? Stay out of it. Let them do it. And what is not enough? Like nothing's happening. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, the interesting thing about what you're saying is that you're really describing a manager doing something new for the first time, right? Because they were an individual contributor. Now they got this team and they're like, I can't do 6 people's worth of work. And that's the only skill set I have is to write amazing, fast, clean code. That's what I know how to do, for example, or whatever they're doing. Sell widgets. So So what we're really saying, the micromanager and the I need to be an expert, hyper, like running themselves into the ground manager who's setting a terrible example for work-life balance for everyone else, like those are the same person, really. They're people who don't have a skill set to create a team where people can work together because it's a completely different skill set. And they have to learn those skills. That's what they have to do. And it's the same set of things. A manager has to be able to say to their team, like, we're doing this and I'm going to do my best, but I need you to talk to me. I need you to tell me what you need. And I need you to tell me, because my tendency, I'll speak for myself when I'm, in charge of something, my tendency is to like get all up in it. Like I go all into the weeds, right? Like I don't think I'm a micromanager, but I would say I fall on that side as opposed to the like, whatever, take the work off their plate. I'm like, we're going to do it together, right? We're going to do it together. And they're like, actually, I was going to do it. And I don't know what you're going to do because you're the manager. And I'm like, So that's a human being having the experience of doing something new. And they have to recognize, that manager has to recognize that they can't do their employees' work. And they need their employees to tell them when now, is that manager, like, we all live in the world, right? Like, you can't actually say to that person, I need you to develop better people skills, if you don't mind.
Right.
And it's like your boss. Yeah. So instead, like, the question is, like, what can the person do who has that micromanaging manager?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's all the old strategy. You have to manage up, You have to model. If you've got the skills, you're really just in relationship with that person. The hierarchy is an illusion anyways. So if you say to them, hey, I'm feeling like our relationship's a little bit strained and you're not sure I can do what you've asked me to do, and that makes me feel bad. So can we talk about that? Like, what about this do you need to have your hands on, and what part can I have, and like how can I communicate that with you? Sometimes it takes the courage to be the one who's not really in a position to manage, and just manage up, manage around, try to be the voice for transparent communication, try to be the voice that recognizes what mindset block and where it's coming from. That's all any of us can do, really, as people are knotted up and tangled and worried and feeling like they're barely surviving and exhausted. Everyone's exhausted. Like, in those kinds of environments, it's really just people in relationship with each other trying to accomplish a task. If you can get it back down to that point and communicate about the rest of it, which is a very hard skill set, but a totally doable and workable one, then you can, as the worker bee, transform the hive. If there's an appetite for it. If there isn't, then you may need to go somewhere where there's more of an appetite for it, or seek to be, moved up and have more internal power to transform the hive or whatever. That is your question. I don't know. Felt unsatisfying.
I mean, that kind of dove into the micromanaging part of things. In today's day and age, you as a manager are often tasked to do new things, to take on more work, additional work, and it's not like they ask you, when would be a good time for you to, that doesn't exist, right? This is real life is, hey, 3 more things just hit us and you're going to take on all 3. How do you be successful at starting something new when bandwidth is already tight, or it's not the right time?
Mm-hmm. So I might have an unpopular opinion here. This might be where, like, the reality of, if you want something to change, you have to change it. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Right?
Yeah.
And we live in an unsustainable work world. We just do. What you just said is what happens. However, if you say no, that takes a lot of courage. And you have to be like in it to win it. You have to be like, I love this company, or I love my mental health, or whatever it is that you need to ground down into, to say, like, if you're the manager of a team and someone comes and wants to put 3 new projects on your team, but they're already working and they're freaking the frick out, like they can't do anymore, the courage to say, I'm sorry, we don't have the bandwidth for it. It's not possible. And that's where, and people are like, well, I'll get fired. No, you'll get promoted, actually, because it's the people who know their team, know their company, know their worth, know their work, who are saying, like, this isn't possible. We have to do it a different way. Because if you just keep piling it on, we're going to lose these people. And then we're going to have even fewer people. And I'm going to spend all my time hiring. And that's not going to work. We've got the resources we need. These are the people we need. If you stress them out, they're going to leave. And then what are we going to do? So no, I won't do it. Now, I won't do it, like, that's not exactly right, but it's saying, like, we can't do it under these circumstances. What do you want to let go? What do you want to slow down? I mean,
that's the really important conversation that I feel like is missed oftentimes. Is it's easy to just say, well, you should say no. And the way that conversation actually sounds is more like, well, we can't do it right now because here, I'll never forget. I had a manager. It was a great idea. They had all of the projects that the team was working on listed on a board, on a whiteboard in their office. And so when the boss came in and said, hey, I want to give you guys this and this and this, they said, we can do that. And which of those things up on this board right here?
Go here and mark them off.
I was going to say, cross off the 3 that we don't have to do anymore so that we can do that. Or let me hire, and so that conversation, instead of saying, no, it's kind of more of a, well, not in the current situation. However, tell us how you want to shift it, and then leave it up to the upper management. It's not your job to decide that. It's ultimately going to be up to them who answer up anyway. So just, I don't know.
Yeah. And I think that's right. It is that conversation. And I think it's a conversation where what I think about this most of all at the individual level, and how people end up extremely burned out, but teams burn out too, right?
Absolutely.
And it's like, we are like, I'm a team player. I'll keep giving. I'll keep giving. I'll keep giving.
Yeah.
And you start out in the perfect world with like an 80% workload and a 20% buffer for the things that happen that you didn't anticipate.
Yep.
And then it's like, well, you can add this and this and this. You get up to 100% of a workload. And then you're like, well, what? There's nothing left to give. But you're like, but I'll find it. And you give up your weekends and you give up your mornings and you give up your afternoon. You give up your middle of the night. You're checking your email. Like the reality is that there is an actual bandwidth, and we've given all of our mental health, all of our free time, all of our everything to it. And now you will end up in the hospital. Like you will end up in the hospital and then you won't do anything. You'll be on medical leave. So it's a system that's like pretending there are no resource problems is not a healthy system. And so when you think about it at the like senior management level, and they're just like, well, they're just cracking the whip. Well, then they end up with an unhealthy, toxic system where people don't stay and they leave and they have all that churn cost. But if you have actually managers who are like, we want to have a healthy system. We don't want people to leave. We want our people to be at all creative, right? Because nothing new is coming out of these people if they're this exhausted. Then the conversation has to pull back down into 80%. And nobody's going to do it if every single person in the rank and file or on the front lines is like, well, just keep piling it on because I have to, because I'm afraid, because I don't want to lose my job, because I'm in the hierarchy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So who draws the line? Well, I'll tell you who draws the line for me. I'm not doing it. And that's where I'll be in relationship with you. I'll be on your team. I'll think big about how our team can accomplish this. But will I sacrifice my mental health for this job? I will not. So either fix the system or I'm gone. And that I think is where we actually are right now in the world of work. But, we don't have really the skills yet to navigate it, but we're going to have them soon.
Absolutely. And I think this conversation is important, like you said, for me individually and for me as a supervisor and with a team, like that. It happens at all levels, right? I mean, I talked about my manager who had the whiteboard with the team's things, but then when your boss comes to you individually and says, hey, I need you to take on these 3 things, you've got your own whiteboard and you point to your whiteboard personally and say, well, here's the 25 other things that I'm working on. So which 3 would you like me to drop in order to take this on, because I can't. And so that kind of real conversation, oh man, definitely
real conversation is what it is. Because
I love what you said too about 80%. Like you need to operate at this level so that you can, you do have a little bit of give where you can push it higher, but you can't just run 100% all the time. It's not sustainable. You end up in the hospital.
You truly do. I did. And I think like the interesting thing about like the whiteboard analogy is it's like we live in such a data-driven world. People are like, if you can point to the data, then you can have what you want. But human beings are not data-driven. And so sometimes the data you need to point to is, I hear what you were saying. I might cry right now, which tells me that I'm extremely exhausted. I have not had a weekend. I have not gone home and watched TV. And I honestly cannot take on any more work because I feel terrible. And this is where it all comes together. A good manager can hear that as a data-driven conversation. The data of myself. I'm tired. I can't do anymore. We just ran to meet this deadline that you said was critical. And now you're saying there's another critical deadline. We have to have a break. A manager hears that and says, my people are tired. They need a minute. You're not going to get this next week. You're going to get it in 2 weeks. And that's just how it is.
Yeah.
So it's about like allowing sort of the whiteboard of our emotions and our experiences and our life to be data worth listening to at the team level too.
Absolutely. And I think you're alluding to my last question I wanted to ask you was about, what does this mean for you personally? I mean, what's your story? I mean, you seem like you're speaking with a lot of experience with this, and you shared earlier about all your degrees and diplomas, and that's awesome. But what does this mean for you personally, Amanda?
Yeah, well, so the history of it is that I got my PhD and was going to be a professor, and then decided that was a little too. I work mostly with schools, and I really love helping schools make change so that students, like I feel like we have all this untapped potential, these students who aren't getting the support that they need. And if they just did like we'd have the answer to every question we need, right? The information is not what we need. It's always in the implementation. So that was very powerful to me. I thought, well, let me go work with these schools. And I started doing consulting. And while I was doing consulting, that's a quintessential, you don't understand what my life is like, Amanda. I have 14 clients. They don't talk to each other. It's all urgent. It has to be done by the end of the school year. And now it's June. Everything has to be done or we're going to lose all our money. And I totally bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. I was like, okay, the kids' lives are on the lines. I'm in it to win it. Like, I will sacrifice myself. And I did end up in the hospital having like a heart attack that turned out to be a panic attack. And I had to, that's the impetus of really stopping and saying, like, this can't be the way. I can't sacrifice myself. The subtitle of my book is Do What Matters Most About Sacrificing Everything Else. Because I started to think you couldn't do both. You couldn't be in it to solve the world's problems and help the world's people and make a difference and make things good and not sacrifice every single part of yourself in order to do it. The gestalt, the zeitgeist says that you can't do both. But I discovered in the 10 years or so of like recalibrating my own stance in the world and the way I interact with people and the way I project manage, is a lot of this productivity stuff, in the book, that actually you do much better, much more great work when you aren't sacrificing everything else. And we live listen, you mentioned AI. AI has the common knowledge locked up. It will tell it to you in 6 sentences flat. How do we do this? Here's how. You can't pretend like that's what we need. So we have to change the way we understand the human being's relationship to the world of work. Our job is not to be these factual doers. Our job is to manage the flow of information and to be sources of creativity. We can't do that if we're exhausted and miserable all the time. That's what I discovered anyways, is that when I stopped running on fumes all the time, I was able to do everything I ever wanted to do. I built a massive coaching business while still working a full-time job. I wrote a book and I started a podcast and I don't know, like healed my relationship with my family, which had gotten deeply stressed. And like, I'm the only person who can say for sure that I did those things, outside of the book, which you could read. But what I know, my lived experience of it, is totally different. On the one hand, I was like grasping, like Daffy Duck in the desert, just all the time. Versus like, I don't know, Roger Rabbit. No, not Roger Rabbit. Who's the rabbit? Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny who's like jazzing it up, wearing like, like a big hat.
Right.
I'd rather be Bugs Bunny. I don't need to be all exhausted in the desert anymore. And everything I wanted, the way that I work, the work that I do is much better. People like working with me more. I get way more opportunity. I get way more money. It's drastically changed my life, which is why I wrote the book. I was like, let me help people understand how to do this. But it takes a big leap. People don't believe you. But then you write a book and then they read it and they try it and then they believe you. So give it a shot is my point. That's what it means to me, Brian.
Unfortunately, many people have to go all the way to the breaking point. To actually recognize that something's got to change, something's got to give. And that something isn't just turning off your email at 4:00 every day. That's a piece of it. You're right. All that knowledge is out. I mean, AI could probably solve all your problems if you actually did what it said.
Did what AI told you.
Do what it said anyway. Now, you mentioned the books.
Yeah, Great Work is the main title.
I'll drop a link in the comments. And now if folks want to keep in touch with you, where's the best place?
I would go on over to my website, which is amandacrowell.com. I'm sure that'll be in the show notes too. And just sign up for the email list. I send an email usually once a month, sometimes twice a month, depending on if it's an event or something. And you can listen to the podcast and read the book. Read the book. And is it okay? I just wanted to say one thing about what you said about like, we don't want people to get to the breaking point before they actually start making a change. I've heard you say this on the podcast a few times. Your podcast, this one. I say this is what I say about that. Sometimes it's hard not to do it if you haven't hit the breaking point. Here's what I would say. Accept that you've hit the breaking point. Because everybody feels like they have. I can't do this anymore, they say. Right. Yes.
Because that is the breaking point.
Let that be your breaking point. Don't go to the hospital. Just be like, my kid's mad at me for missing their birthday. Let that be the breaking point. Let it turn you around. It's just a choice in your mind to do that.
If you're hearing this and you're wondering if you're at the breaking point, That's actually
Ryan and I
the breaking
agree.
point.
You're there.
Well, Amanda, here's what I love. I love that because of you hitting the breaking point, you now have this book and you've continued to do all of this work and you're sharing this awesome knowledge. You and I are very much aligned on these ideas. I think we agree more than we disagree on a lot of these things. I feel like you and I could continue talking for hours, and
Yes.
we're not going to do that to you listening, but it is such a treat to have you. Thank you very much for joining us today and for sharing some of that. And I hope that you do check out the book and check out great work and think about the great work you can be doing if you recognize that you're already at your breaking point.
There you go. Yeah.
So if you have a friend or colleague who is at that breaking point or also is looking to start something new, because that's what we talked about today. If you've got a colleague who's interested or hitting that point, if you would share this episode link to this one specifically with them, I know Amanda and I would both love that, because the conversation that happens when you send someone an actual episode is a really cool connection that gets to happen where you can talk about that and you can actually bond with that person. And I love that. I do that with people all the time. And so that's my invitation to you listening, is send this to a friend or colleague who you think would benefit from this. I love sharing Productivity Gladiator with you. That's a wrap.
Productivity Gladiator.